Hello everyone, Marissa Miller here, and if you are new, then welcome to my channel, and if you are one of my current loyal 12 subscribers, then welcome back to my channel. I am an author-illustrator. I have currently published 2 books. The first is a picture book called Chasing Figments, and the second is a middle grade young readers book called The Grim and the Fantastic. Both are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailing sources if you are interested in checking them out. So for today's video, I thought I would go over some editing and proofing things that I look for. This is part of my Publishing Diaries process. I started a series called the Publishing Diaries that is going to be documenting my processes and proceedings through going to publish. I am going from finishing writing the book to publishing it. My goal is October. It is currently the middle of July right now, and all the things that I need to do to reach that goal. If you are interested, I do, in the rest of those videos, I do have a playlist called the Publishing Diaries that has the other videos associated with this particular project. It is my first young adult book that I will be publishing. It also is going to be book 1 of a 4-part series, and it is a mashup retelling of 3 classic stories that are currently in the public domain. It makes the process a little bit differently dealing with that. I guess it's not like fan fiction per se or anything. It's more like think like the TV show Once Upon a Time, how they took like all these classic characters and then they put them in these new situations and stuff. So that's what's happening with my work in progress currently. So in this process so far, though, I am finishing writing up everything. I have a couple more chapters left to do, and then I think I will be at a stopping point for writing, fingers crossed. And that means that I am moving into the realm of proofing and editing. So what is proofing and editing? We're going all the way back to the basics. I would say proofing is identifying the issues and editing is acting on them, like fixing them. So I already printed out the first 9 chapters of this book last month in June and went through it. So I have a lot of notes for things to go back through, or just basically when I proof, I go through and I make a lot of notes that can be anything from corrections to observations to reminders and things. I will say that with this being a series, it is a little bit different, like a different process than say like The Grim and the Fantastic, because I do have to pay mind to the overall plot of the 4 books as a whole conglomerate story, rather than just like each individual book. I had a friend that did it kind of by each individual book, and there was an overall plot, but I feel like the focus was more geared towards each individual books, and I think that caused him a lot more headache overall, because there were a lot more inconsistencies and plot holes, and there was a lot of having to refer back to the first book to make sure that this went well and stuff. So I'm kind of trying to mitigate that by really focusing on the plots as a whole and making notes and like correlations. I spent a lot of time actually earlier at the beginning of this month and the end of last month really making sure that as I'm weaving these 3 stories together, that I'm coming up with like the back histories of these characters and their connections and how they interconnect, and like, okay, I want this connection to be revealed in book 1, 2, 3, 4, and kind of coming up with those things, so that way if I already know that, then I can be layering in, you know, like foreshadowing or things like that and planning for that in my story better. That if I'm like, okay, this is book 1, I want it to be this, and then okay, it's done start to finish, and then you go and you start book 2 and you're like, okay, this is book 2, what do I want book 2 to say? Okay, I'm carrying on from the last book and we're continuing on the story. Okay, now what? Oh, what was it that I said in book 1? Oh, that would make good foreshadowing for this. So like, not that you can't do that, but to me that just sounds kind of like a lot more of a headache. So I decided that I didn't want to do that, and I'm trying to plot it as a whole. I will be printing out the remaining chapters along with the original 9 and going through it as a whole and proofing it. And then I will do a round of editing myself, and then I will be sending it to a friend to read, to do a kind of like a peer edit, and she's going to read through it, proof it, and write notes, and then I will review those I will decide which ones I want to listen to and which ones I choose to ignore, or maybe it'll say like, oh hey, like obviously this didn't come off like how I wanted it to, so I better rewrite that for more clarification, or things like that. Like that's how you can look at the notes, and always getting notes back can be kind of like, because you know, you're having to like share a part of yourself with someone and then they give it back to you, and there are all these things, and it can be a little discouraging. But I would say that overall having that other set of eyes is a gift, and it's something that you're lucky to have, and you should always look at these edits as constructive, and as the creator you have every right to choose which notes you listen to and which ones you decide to ignore. I feel like ignore is kind of a harsh word, but you get what I mean. That is going to be the process. Then when I get it back from her, I will be proofing her comments and editing again, and then it will probably continue on in that. But I would say that my goal is to make all the big necessary changes in July before, so because I have to do my copyright by the end of this month, hopefully sooner, so that I give it enough time, because I do know that the copyright office is closed physically and everything is going through online, and so I'm guessing that it's backed up, and I'm hoping that I will be able to get my copyright in time, because I can't publish if I don't have the copyright, because I am dealing with public domain material, and I just want to make sure that I am not liable for anything or any other retellings or renditions of these stories. So I have to get the copyright done, but before you copyright, you want to make sure that you have basically all the major edits done. You can still submit a copyright and have like small changes, but if you're gonna like cut out a chapter or add a chapter, or you know, rewrite like half of 3 chapters, or do a lot that's going to change the book, then your original copyright won't protect it anymore. So if it's going to be small changes, like, oh, I'm adding a sentence in here, or like I'm taking a sentence away here, or you know, I'm changing some typos or something that I felt like, that's not a big deal. So basically there are 5 things that I look for when primarily, obviously there's like more in-depth versions of each of these, but like these are just kind of like the 5 basics. So I would say the first thing I look for is mostly geared towards plot. I'm going to read through it kind of with like an eagle eye view, like a broad overview that's going to tell me basically like, oh hey, this doesn't make sense, or I need to add something in here, or I don't like the way this reads, or does this section really further the plot, or maybe I need something else to further the plot here. This chapter is too long, I should separate it. Okay, does that mean I need to add in another chapter? And like so on and so forth. So I'm going to be really looking at the plot first and foremost, and making sure that there aren't any plot holes and there aren't any like inconsistencies, and that I'm making sure to set myself up well for the remainder of my books and my story. The second thing that I go through when I look for it then is going to be more of a detailed perspective, and I'm going to be looking for typos. So this is going to mostly be missing words, misspellings, like putting in the wrong word, things like that. Like I have a tendency to drop articles and prepositions when I'm typing for some reason, namely the words like at, the, to, a, things like that. And sometimes I can miss those things sometimes, and so when I read that through, I definitely look for that, because I know that. I think it's important to be cognizant of your own strengths and weaknesses in writing, and I know that I have a tendency to drop words, so like I have to really try to focus in and look for that, so that way I don't have missing words in the final product, hopefully. And then of course typos, words, you know, like through instead of though, or things like that, you know, that are really fine-tuned, fine details. There's a series that I read, that I have been reading since I was 8 years old, and it's called Warrior Cats, and it has something like 40 books in the main core part of the series. It does have 3 writers as well that are all under one pen name. But anyway, I noticed as I would go through that, as I was reading it, that there were times where as a reader I would notice things like these background characters, like their eye color changed, or their sometimes a background character's gender would have changed, and it was like a male cat in one book, and then like 3 books later it's a female cat. And I'm like, wait a minute, you know. So there are like little inconsistencies and things like that that you have to be careful of, that you're remaining consistent for it, and that your typos aren't, you're not putting him instead of her or vice versa, that sort of thing. Then the third thing that I look to is going to be dialogue and dialogue tags, dialogue formatting and stuff. So basically what that's going to be like is dialogue kind of has its own set of rules for punctuation that's a little bit different than, like, I guess, traditional punctuation. So in a general statement, I'm going to the store, it would be just, I'm going to the store, period. Okay. Well, in a dialogue, and I'm quoting that I'm saying that, then it's going to go, quote, I'm going to the store, comma, end quote, I said. And so the I said is going to be the dialogue tag. It's not a very good one, using I said isn't very descriptive. But that is going to be the dialogue tag, and then the rest of it. So you put, like, I guess it's kind of considering like it's all one sentence usually with the dialogue and the tag. And that can be kind of hard for me to rewire my brain to do that, because I think like, oh no, this should be a period or whatever. And there are instances, I would say, like, if you're really concerned about your dialogue formatting and stuff, you can always do like a cursory Google search, and it'll clear up a lot of the rules for you if you're ever like, I don't know what I should do. And then obviously if it's a question or an exclamation point or something, or if you have your dialogue tag set first and then the actual dialogue follows. So like, I looked at Marjorie and said, comma, quote, let's go to the store, period, end quote. That would be an example of like a statement thing. So you can like look up those sorts of things, but I feel like I didn't do that with the Grim and the Fantastic. I don't remember if I did or not, so my dialogue might technically be incorrect. It's not like the end of the world. You can always make stylistic choices, but you know, that's just kind of a general thing that I do look for. Either way, you want to keep it consistent. Consistency is huge with any sort of formatting or layout or anything like that. Like if something isn't consistent, then it's going to not look professional. So be consistent. That's the takeaway there. And fourth is going to be more so like punctuation in general. I have kind of an affinity to avoid commas. I don't like commas. I never have. Obviously I know when to use them mostly, you know, like, okay, like natural pauses and things like that. But then I don't like overly cluttered sentences, like that are cluttered with punctuation, because I feel like commas are mostly intended to be pauses. And so like if I see a bunch of commas, even if like there's a rule that says it should be there, then it makes me kind of like feel like the sentence is disjointed. So if I look it up and I see that it's a rule that doesn't have a hard and fast, like you can have the comma there or you cannot have the comma there, I'm more inclined to not have the comma there. It was a point of contention with me and my mom during the Grim and the Fantastic, because she kept wanting me to put all these commas in because they were rules, hard and fast rules, when she was like a kid or like a teenager or whatever. And then, but now they're not hard and fast anymore. So she still firmly believes that I'm missing a lot of commas in that book, but technically speaking, I'm not. And then 5 is going to be for formatting. So overall formatting, the way that my process is that I do get a proof book to finally approve everything. So I'm going to see it all printed out basically at some point, right? But I want to make sure that I print everything out as it's going to be, essentially. So like if I have it set up to like 5.5 by 8.5 or whatever, like a trade back copy, then I want to print it out as such, so that way I can look and be like, okay, all of my margins are consistent, all of my page numbers are in the same spot, all of my character styles and like you know, the layout for like my body text is all in the same font and it's the same size, and all of my indentations are consistent, and the first line of my chapter is all the same, because I usually make the first line of my chapter, it has either like all caps, or I have the first letter larger, or just do something to kind of differentiate it. So I want to make sure that all the first lines are consistent. I want to make sure all my chapter headings are in the same spot, and the measurements, if this had illustrations, which I'm not planning to have illustrations in this book, then I would try to make sure all my illustrations were consistently placed to the best of my ability, and all these things. So you just want to make sure that the overall visual presentation looks correct and is the same and consistent. And then that's also going to branch over into like the cover, because I guess whether you do your own cover or not, like I do my own cover and I do the layout for my own cover myself. Gatekeeper sends me a template, and so then I do all the like text and placement of images and all that sort of thing. I decide what goes on there. They basically just give me like the parameters and the barcode to place on there. So, but you want to go through and you want to make sure also that you're proofing your cover, that your images are in high quality if you are doing them yourself. Even if someone sends it to you, especially when you get your proof book, you want to make sure that there isn't any pixelization, that your images are high enough resolution, that all of your font is correct, there aren't any missing words. You know, you do the same type of proofing and editing on your all of your matter on the front that you would, you know, otherwise, like in your book. It needs to be the same on your like description, your back jacket description, your author bio if it's on there, all that kind of stuff. You need to proof your front matter and everything too. So anyway, those are all the things that I look for when I am proofing and editing, and that is where this is the step that I'm going into currently with my work in progress, what I'm going to be working on now. And so I'm going to be printing it out just from my work, for my Google Docs, and I'm going to be going through and making notes. I'm going to do my revisions, and then I'm going to give it to a friend, give them back to me. Another option is you can't always hire an editor if you don't feel comfortable doing your editing and stuff yourself. I have a background in some editing stuff, so I feel more comfortable doing that. But even so, I was still considering hiring a professional editor just for like a different set of eyes, I guess, and just making sure that you know, everything is being reviewed by enough eyes to catch all the major errors. I would say that if you do choose to hire a personal or like a professional editor, then go ahead and do your own revision first. Maybe have someone else that could peer review it, do another revision, and then send it to a professional editor, because then you're paying for them to really look at all the fine-tuned details that need observation and fixing, that like amateur editors might miss, but a professional is going to see it, and so their focus is going to be on that rather than any sort of glaring errors that just like a general reader or like amateur editors might you know, catch themselves. So that is pretty much it. I hope that this video is informative, if not helpful, that if you are looking for ways to edit your work or knowing kind of what to look for, that maybe this might be informational and helpful to you. If you already know what you're doing, or you do just hire out for editing and stuff, then I guess this is just kind of story time for how I do my own stuff. But either way, I hope it was entertaining and informational. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you could give it a like. And if you have anything to say, please leave a comment. I love talking to people and engaging and meeting more people in the writing and reading communities and the art communities, whatever it may be. So if you feel the itch to leave a comment, please do. I have a hard time getting people to comment on things of mine, which makes me sad because I really do enjoy talking to people. So definitely feel free to comment. I love responding to comments and talking to people, and just making new friends and having dialogues and conversations. It's a lot of fun. And lastly, if you are interested in staying up to date with my content that I post on here regarding being an author, illustrator, or if you're just interested in following the remainder of my Publishing Diary series, then go ahead and hit subscribe and hit the notification bell. I don't have a normal schedule for when I post videos. I kind of just do them as they pop up. But if you hit that notification bell, then you will be notified every time that I do post a video, whenever that may be. So that is everything I think that I'm supposed to cover. So that is it for me. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye.